Hello there, it's Friday, which means it's time once again for the best movie podcast ever, the only movie podcast to offer objective and hyperbole-free discussion of every movie in the known universe. I am your host, the podcaster with no name, Konrad, and with me as always, an invisible man sleeping in your bed, it's Anthony James.
Surprise!
Busting makes him feel good. Anthony, how the devil are you?
I'm doing well. I love that as a line out of context of the song.
I will full disclosure. There's a very very funny. It's not really a remix. It's kind of like a rearrangement of that song that just focuses on the line "busting makes me feel good." That I have listened to probably several hundred times at this point. So it's not my joke. It's a stolen joke. But you know, good artists pay homage, great artists steal.
Oh, it's a fantastic joke. Busting. Yeah. So we are here to talk about The Invisible Man. I suppose it kind of counts as like ghost busting, I suppose. In a way. He's
not really a ghost.
Oh.
Is it? I mean, or is he? Or is he?
Or
we don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll have to. You know, we'll go through that. I mean, in many ways, that is why this podcast exists, to uncover these kind of mysteries that lie at the heart of film narratives. But I think before we do that, no, wait. There's nothing I actually want to talk about in this introduction. I've got a little bit of an overview to go through, but I need to do the line first, don't I? Before we get to that. So, without further ado, let's talk about some gosh darn movies.
Let's do it.
Movies about invisible people. There's not that many of them, but there's some, and we're going to talk about one of them. That's right. It's The Invisible Man from 2020. Mm-hmm. Some of our YouTube channel subscribers, which is the Culture Cave, you should be subscribed if you're not already, may have seen that I did a best of 2020 video. Yes. At the end of 2020, because when else would I have done that?
I think you did at the start of 2021.
It might
just to be nitpicky, on you.
Put me on blast for my punctuality rather.
Yeah.
It was around 2020, and this was on it. I can't remember where I put it, to be honest. I think it was number 3 possibly, but it's on UK Netflix now. I don't think that many people saw this movie, and hopefully more will see it now.
Well, it's currently trending as we record this. It's currently trending in the top 10 of the UK Netflix, as well as that I've seen a few articles popping up about the brilliant use of tension within the film. So it's gaining some notoriety now.
Oh yes, it's strung like a violin. This thing, it's absolutely it's tense as you like. It feels like it could fly apart any minute. The one interesting thing that I wanted to say in the kind of fun little preamble bit before we get down to brass tacks is that apparently, I only found this out today when I was doing my notes for this episode, but this was planned to be a part of the ill-fated Universal Dark Universe extended universe, the one that had Tom Cruise's The Mummy, and I'm trying to remember who else. It was like Russell Crowe as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and I know Johnny Depp was in there as some nonsense.
Yeah, The Mummy. What else was there? Dracula? Was there a Dracula going to go happen? I don't
know. There must have been a Dracula in there somewhere. Mm-hmm. I can't remember who played Dracula, but it was very early on. It was planned to be that, but then Leigh Whannell, the director, has since come out and said, "No, this is nothing to do with that. Keep that shit away from this wonderful movie." And God bless him for it, because
I mean, how would that even work? You can imagine, what? Supernatural things, and then you've just got a tech billionaire. It's interesting, isn't it?
I mean, it was right in the who knows? They'll figure out a way. It was right in the middle of that stretch where every single fucking major studio in Hollywood wanted to have their own extended universe, so that they could just be like, "Oh, we're gonna hint that Frankenstein is gonna show up at the end of this one." Yes, I know it's Frankenstein's monster. That's part of the joke I'm making. All right, I can see you at home there typing that.
Frankenstein monster.
Have you watched that yet?
No.
Frankenstein's monster Frankenstein. It is really funny. It reminds me of Garth Marenghi's Dark Place a bit.
Really?
I don't know what you call it, because it's like a little kind of half-hour standalone thing. It's not a movie. It's just a weird thing that David
piece of art. Harbour.
Yeah,
David
sure.
Harbour.
It's just David Harbour. That's it. Yeah. It's just a piece of art that he released out into the ether, and I don't know who saw it, but I did, and I loved it. But right,
that does blow my mind, to be honest with you, about the Monster Universe thing. I never saw any of those films, to be honest with you. I have no care about those films. I'm not really, as you say, I was a bit turned off by all the. I'm still turned off by DC, still trying to do it. I'm turned off by all these other companies trying to jump on the bandwagon and trying to have their own extended universe. This would have to have been, without getting into spoilers until later, but this would have to have been a completely different film if they were going to go that way. Like this, I can't imagine the film that we see here being in any way connected to any other film.
Well, yeah, I mean, I never saw any of them either, to be honest. I just, as is my right as an internet film person, is to sit back and judge things that I've not actually watched.
Yeah.
But I mean, I've seen that wonderful gift of the trailer for Tom Cruise's The Mummy that they accidentally released that didn't have any of like the sound treatment on it, so it was just the VFX, or it was just the sound effects of like Tom Cruise shouting as he like flew around a crashing C-130 plane, which is again another very funny thing. But I mean, they're on a C-130, which is a big, not passenger, it's like a cargo or military cargo airplane.
Oh yes,
so I guess there is stuff that's set in the present day that's vaguely tech focused. So maybe they could have fit the Invisible Man into that. But
yeah, actually thinking about it, they could have.
Thank God they didn't. Is all I'll say. But that's what we're here to talk about. So for those of you who don't know or haven't seen it yet, we're not going to talk spoilers immediately. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that an Invisible Man will be featured in this film. That is not false advertising. It's not a naked lunch situation.
I have some thoughts about that, but I'll let you finish what you're saying.
Oh, okay. Well, fine. We're off to the races already. The only thing I was going to say before that then was that this is directed by Leigh Whannell, directed and written by Leigh Whannell, who is kind of it's an interesting position they find themselves in, because they've made a lot of like Blumhouse horror. That's the kind of production company that does like Insidious. They did a lot of the Paranormal Activities. They did Insidious. They did a lot of the Purge movies.
Annabelle.
Yes, Annabelle as well. And to be honest, they've made a lot of horror movies that I don't like. As a broadly speaking, there's some good ones in there, but most of them I haven't really liked. But then in 2020, they produced this and Freaky, which I loved absolutely. I absolutely loved both of them. And I think it's like it was a really interesting opportunity for Leigh Whannell to kind of prove that he has chops as a horror writer, given that he's been stuck on Saw and Insidious for like 20 years. How did you find this as an auteur experience from Leigh Whannell?
It did, yeah. That's what I mean. Sort of, I can't picture it being part of any extended universe, because it did feel like a director's vision and like they were going for a particular thing. I will say, now, maybe I have to ask you a question. I don't know how to code this question. In the trailer, right, of this movie, I never saw the trailer. Don't know if you did.
I may have done.
I know that this idea of the Invisible Man is a done thing before. There's been a previous film. There's like a very loose connection to H.G. Wells. I understand that, right? But the question I have for you is it just 100% known going in? Is everyone is supposed to just assume and know 100% there is an Invisible Man in this? Because I'm going to tell you this, Conrad. The first 20 minutes of this film, the tension was at a max, and I honestly. I've seen Hollow Man. I think that was who was that? Kevin Bacon.
Kevin Bacon, yeah.
Yeah, so I've seen that many moons ago. But the way this film was set up, and obviously it could still be a metaphor for this, but the way it was set up, really, I was like always thinking to myself in the first sort of 25 minutes, like, holy God, there's gonna be no Invisible Man. There's gonna be,
it's gonna be the big reveal.
Yeah, like they keep having these beautiful shots where they're lingering on a spot in the corner of a room, and you know what? It's all smoke and mirrors. There's gonna be
there's
gonna be no Invisible Man, and and I'm gonna be honest with you. Like, we can get into details later, but I think it's no secret to anyone except for me that there is an Invisible Man in this, and when that happened, I enjoyed the rest of the film, but I was a bit like, oh, okay.
We're doing this, are we?
Yeah.
You've lost me. No, I mean, I think So, I mean, in answer to your first question, I can't really remember the trailer, but I distinctly remember one moment in it, which it's not too much of a spoiler to say, given it is in the trailer, that there's a moment where Elizabeth Moss's character, Cecilia Cass, comes into physical confrontation with with the Invisible Man, and attacks him, and his suit kind of glitches out a bit, and you see the kind of black.
Okay, so that's actually in the trailer. So I didn't know that. I didn't see the trailer at all, and I assumed then, whenever they did the wink at the camera, where there was like one, like maybe it's a police officer character said something like, you know, like this is what happens. You know, you'll be convinced that he's everywhere. You know, he's done the perfect thing of making you convinced that he is there. And I was like, oh my god, well now we know he's going to turn up because they've mentioned it.
Yeah.
But up until that point, I really thought, oh my god, this is going to be so cool. He's not really there.
Well, I mean, so I think you've you've kind of struck upon two really interesting elements of the movie that Lee Winnell kind of drilled into, I think. So, just to briefly outline the plot then for people who maybe don't know yet, Elizabeth Moss plays I think she's an architect. In fact, she is an architect. She goes for a job interview at some point, and she has like drawings of buildings or whatever, that schematics, I guess that's what architects probably call them. So she's called Cecilia Cass, and she escapes an abusive relationship with like a tech billionaire, only to later learn that he has killed himself. But a bunch of unexplained events begin to occur in her life after this, and she starts to suspect that he might not be quite as dead as he seems. So I think
the opening scene though, Conrad, the opening scene with the starting off with her escaping, it was full of tension from the get go. We don't need to be told. There was no shot.
It was wordless.
There was no shot of her with bruises. There was no shot of her with with damage done to her physically by him. It was just all through the performance of the character. We knew what was happening. And I will say about it, it reminded me of the film Sleeping with the Enemy.
I know of it. I don't think I've ever seen that.
So the film Sleeping with the Enemy is Julia Roberts in a abusive relationship with a mustachioed man, and there's a big meme about the mustache coming to get you. But basically, it's basically the plot of this film, except the mustachioed man doesn't go invisible. And there's a lovely scene with Brown Eyed Girl. That wasn't in this one, but
we don't get that in this. That wouldn't have been tonally right, I don't think, for what Lee Winnell was going for.
There's no like long brown-haired, blue-eyed, beautiful man to cheer up the main character in this one, like there was in the Julia Roberts one.
Yeah,
but it is basically the same storyline. Yeah.
To be honest, I'm quite glad that they don't like try to resolve Elizabeth Moss's trauma having survived an abusive relationship by tossing her into another relationship.
They've improved on the Sleeping with the Enemy, definitely in that regard.
That always feels like a quite lazy and cheap way of attempting to conclude a character arc like that.
Yeah.
But no, you're absolutely right. The opening scene, it's this amazing like wordless escape from their beachfront house, and it nothing is spoken. It's just, as you say, everything is implied through actions and her behavior, but the tension is just ramped up so high, and you immediately understand the stakes of what is going on, and you're completely you're rooting for Cecilia by the end of it, even though literally a word hasn't been spoken in the first 15 minutes of the movie. And it's such a, talking about Lee Winnell as an auteur, that was like, as an introduction to a movie, really. I know that he made Upgrade before this, which I've not seen, but I've heard is really good as well. But for me, this was like my introduction to him as making something that maybe felt like it was a bit more of his voice. Right, I don't want to diminish the other stuff he's made, but a lot of the Saw movies and the Annabelle movies, they feel like they're kind of written to formula a little bit. They're sort of, we're going to make a spooky movie about a doll or whatever, and it's not necessarily as creative as what he's doing here. But that opening is simply fantastic, and one of the strongest openings for any movie, let alone a horror movie, that I've seen in ages. And then you've got the really interesting and quite bold decision that I wanted to get your thoughts on, because this is kind of like the central idea that Lee Winnell is bringing to this story is like you take the original H.G. Wells Invisible Man story, as I recall it, and it's been a long time since I've seen that movie, is a man drinks a mad scientist drinks a potion that makes him go invisible, and he experiments with himself to try and get himself to turn visible again, and he kind of goes mad, and I think he might kill some people, but it's very much focused on the Invisible Man. And I think the decision here to say we're going to instead focus on, we're going to use this entire thing as a metaphor for the trauma that a survivor of an abusive relationship carries with them into their life after that relationship has ended, constantly fearing that somehow that, you know, the abusive partner is, you know, gonna seek retribution or is around the corner from them, and to kind of heighten that by making it about a tech billionaire who has access to a suit that makes him invisible and literally is around the, like, waiting to exact revenge is so, like, I absolutely love that as a way of, like, you just take your theme and you're like, fuck it, you're going right in the middle of this movie, and then you build everything around it. Did that work for you? Because it's quite a brave idea that might not work for some people.
Oh, it works for me, definitely. I think that's why I was whenever I was like dreaming of the idea of this film getting the whole way through and having him never be there. At the same time, that's too wishful thinking. That would be so hard to carry for a full feature length film, you know. But whenever, like, you know, the metaphor was still there and the theme was still there, it really worked for me. It really, really worked for me. I also liked how, you know, he kept driving wedges between different characters who she was like seeking refuge with, and like the moment where, you know, he first comes in contact with someone where he you know, basically little things keep happening where she keeps thinking she hears something, or he leaves a bottle of pills which were hers and she knows. She's starting to slowly think, you know, he's still here, he's here somewhere. And then finally, now I don't know if this is the first one, but it is definitely one of the first ones. She's with the young teenage girl who she has even going to pay for her university through the money that she's got through inheritance. The teenage girl gets smacked out of nowhere by the Invisible Man, and of course she's just going to assume that it was the other woman in the room, and then that sort of throws her out of those comfortable relationships that she had when she was seeking refuge. That moment where it's nothing anyone could do. The dad did the right thing. The girl obviously did the right thing in thinking that someone had hit her. That was such a huge release of tension, but also in such a horrific way that I thought it really worked as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, that's just Winnell developing this idea of how an abusive relationship kind of drives a wedge between you and your support network. So in this case, you've got Aldous Hodge and his daughter, who are like a friend to Elizabeth Moss' character, and her sister, who I didn't actually write down who her sister was played by. But, you know, she has these people who are supportive, but as she begins to kind of show, I guess externally, she's perceived as lapsing into paranoia based on the you know, not dealing well with the trauma of the abusive relationship. But for her, she, as you say, she's starting to see signs that maybe her ex isn't actually dead. And they, you know, it starts off with them being skeptical and then kind of questioning her directly about whether these things are actually happening and whether she's of sound mind, and finally they abandon her. And it's so clever in how it's structured, and how it takes Cecilia Cass from a position at the beginning of the movie. Well, certainly she's very vulnerable at the beginning of the movie, but after that initial escape sequence, she's still very vulnerable. You know, she's still someone who's recovering from this relationship, and it takes her from that and pulls her even lower. But I think the thing that I wanted to kind of get your take on was that when you're dealing with an abusive relationship and you're making a horror movie out of it, there's often where if you kind of explain that to someone without actually having seen this movie, there's, I think, the potential that it might come across as exploitative, because a lot of horror has exploited that before, and it's often very poorly done. I didn't find this exploitative at all. I actually found it very sympathetic and very understanding of her as a character and what she'd been through. But I wanted to get your take on that as well, to see if you got any of that from this, or whether it was all cool for you.
Well, it was definitely all cool for me. I didn't get any of that exploitative nature there. I know what you mean. Some of these, we've talked also in the past about, like, certain characters and other things when they have, like, even troubles as a teenager or mental health issues, they just jump straight to cuts on the wrist. This is what I mean. Like, at the start, we didn't get the gratuitous images of, like, bruises upon her body to show what's happened. Like, they didn't go the general route. They actually went through her psychological state of mind more so.
Yeah.
And which really worked for me, and it made it sort of not as cliche as other things, and maybe that just adds to the respect they gave the subject. So therefore, it came across very sort of realistic in a way, but also as I say, respectful to the subject. So yeah, I didn't get any of that exploitation there. I thought they did really well.
Awesome. Okay. Right. Well, I'm going to say we've talked a little bit about stuff that is kind of revealed in this movie thus far, but most of what we've spoken about happens in the first 20 minutes of the movie. So there haven't been any major spoilers yet. I'm going to say now, I want to talk about the spooky bits in this movie, and that means I'm going to say spoilers, because if you want to go into this not being scared for some of the best scares in the movie. Did I say not being scared for some of the best scares? Not being spoiled for some of the best scares is what I want you to be scared by them. And so does Lee Winnell. Then tune out now and maybe tune back in at the end to hear our final thoughts on it. But that's your warning. Spoilers here. So I like scary movies, but I'm a big baby when it comes to scares. I normally end up like covering my eyes or doing.
I'm through the fingers. Yeah, I am too.
Yeah. So how did you cope with this? Because I know you're less of a fan of this kind of stuff than I am.
Yeah, I'm going through a process of coming to terms with the idea that I like watching them. I just didn't realize that everyone who likes horror films was scared of them as well.
Oh, yeah, I'm absolutely like shitting myself every single time I watch one. That's the joy of it.
So yeah, exactly. So I'm coming to learn that joy. I just always thought, like, geez, other people love these horror films. It's crazy. I'm so scared of them, I can't watch them. But basically, yeah. So there was a couple of scares which really did it for me. There was one. Okay, so I'm just gonna say this. I think that I have a really good intuition for fighting invisible people, because there was one or two times in this film where, I know it's a bold claim, but there's one or two times in this film where I was like just willing her to stab the air in front of her, and both of the times I was willing that, he was there, right? So the first one is the when she throws the paint on him in the attic sort of trapdoor thing. And I was just saying to myself, just punch the air in front of you. Just punch the air in front of you.
Just windmill your arms around at all times to strike him.
That's what I said to Emer. I said, I'd just be slicing the air around me all the time.
Or get like a skipping rope and just like just like whip that around your head constantly.
And the other one was whenever she had the gun and he was standing underneath the boot of the car. And I thought to myself, both those times I was like, just like stab the air or punch the air or shoot the air. I was just like, I have really good. I have really good awareness of where they are, obviously.
I mean, that's a great sense.
So I'm sure we'll spend the next 10 minutes talking about all the scares, but I will get into them. But I wanted to mention something. This last thing I wanted to mention before we just get into the scares, because there were a lot of great ones. Why on earth? Now, we've talked about this plenty of times, Conrad. We've talked about this plenty of times, but I need to mention it again. Why does every film have to have a Chekhov's? Chekhov's fire extinguisher. Like, obviously, as soon as you see that fire extinguisher, the whole thing, right? Half an hour ago, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, they actually might not use the fire extinguisher, because how are they going to get back to that house? Like, they're in a mental institution. Why would they go back to that house? And then lo and behold, of course, we're back in the house. Of course, Chekhov's fire extinguisher has to be used in an Invisible Man movie. Why couldn't they just have a fire extinguisher later without showing us the scene of them?
Oh, but then you're filling the screen with unnecessary visual information if you're putting the fire extinguisher there and not using it. I mean, they're definitely. I'm sure there are movies that are like, I'm gonna put this here, and you think it's gonna happen, but the gun will not be fired at any point in this movie. Every
single movie, especially like a horror or an action, has a Chekhov's something. I think it might be the most used device of any film.
Oh yeah, I mean it definitely. I think it definitely is. But I mean, but that's because it's like. I mean, yeah, and it's also just a shorthand of establishing something that's going to happen, so the audience aren't like surprised in a bad way by it happening. Like if you,
it allows me to pat myself on the back as well. It allows me to be like,
exactly, yeah. If this movie it doesn't. I'm going to say this now. I don't want anyone to be spoiled when this doesn't happen, or upset when this doesn't happen. If this movie had ended with a sword fight and they had never shown a sword on the wall of Aldous Hodge's suburban home, then you would have rightly been like, that doesn't make much sense. Why has he got a sword?
Yeah, where does the sword all of a sudden come from?
Yeah, whereas you've got to introduce the sword. A fire extinguisher, admittedly, is a little bit more likely to have in the home, so maybe it's not necessary.
But it's just something I noticed.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely happens a lot. But something else that you actually pointed out earlier, and you've brought us back to here, that I did want to mention, is that for a lot of these, or in fact, actually not even scares in this movie, a lot of the tension around the scares in this movie, because there are jump scares in this movie. I wouldn't say it's a particularly jump scare heavy movie. There's maybe 3 or 4 big ones that I can think of. Yeah. But the tension around it that you identified right at the beginning with Leigh Whannell's use of just wide static shots.
Yes.
Very very similar to the kind of things that you might see in like Hereditary or something like that. Like a wide shot that gives you time to really take in all the visual information in it, and which seems mundane until you notice something that's wrong, and it suddenly makes the whole thing feel very sinister. So there's probably my favourite example in this whole movie is a scene where Cecilia is preparing a meal in Aldous Hodges' house, and it's just a wide shot of her preparing food at a counter with some scrambled eggs cooking on the stove, and then she's called away. The camera stays there and probably lingers for about 10 seconds, and then suddenly a butcher's knife like disappears from the counter, and then a few seconds later the fire on the hob turns up, and it starts burning the food. And it's the sort of trust in your audience to notice. I mean, it's not like that subtle, but the trust in your audience to notice things like that, rather than needing to have like an insert of the knife being pulled off the table or something like that, and it just makes it so much creepier. And I love talking about your much vaunted ability to fight invisible men. The use of negative space in lots of shots that are like a lot of the shots with Cecilia, where it's implied that someone is opposite her, they're shot like dialogue almost. They're shot like shot reverse shot. Like you're looking over her shoulder at negative space, and it's a really really cool technique, because it's sort of like you're conditioned talking about camera and narrative techniques like Chekhov's gun. You're taught to expect like, oh, this is being shot like a dialogue scene, which means there's something there, and then I would say maybe like 70% of the time there's not anything there. There's a lot of like fake outs in this, but then the other 30% of the time, like when she throws the paint on him in the attic, or when she pretends to kill herself and then stabs him with the pen, there is someone there, and it's just used to penetrate that tension and kick off a really really cool action sequence.
And that's what I was going to say actually, is that I found the film once I realized that he was there, and I realized that there was an invisible man, and some of that tension was taken out for me. Now he did a good job of like building it up again in certain moments when he needed to, but I felt like before I found out 100% there is an invisible man, it was a different film. And then once I found out that, once you find out, like, how like these horror films like sort of slowly build up to it, and this film did maybe fall a little bit prey to like daytime nothing happens, nighttime spooky, daytime nothing happens, nighttime spooky.
But nighttime's the scary time.
No, I know, but that is a horror narrative structure, which I think. Yeah. I like films that sort of do away with that, like a bit like Midsommar did, but that fell prey to a little bit. But my point is that once you then knew he was there, and it's nighttime again, I was expecting him to turn up, and therefore the tension didn't ratchet up as much as it did at the very beginning of the film for me.
Oh, okay. I'm like the opposite of that. Like when I know he's going to be there, like during the daytime, I'm like whatever. He's not going to be here.
Yeah.
Even though I think he actually is there a couple of times during the daytime, but then at nighttime I'm like, you bastard, where are you? Reveal yourself.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm definitely on the lookout for him. But I mean, like, for me, it was a full 20-25 minutes of build-up of tension until the first moment where he smacks that girl in the face or whatever he's doing. And that was the moment which scared me the most. The rest of the film, because I was half expecting him to be there all the time, I was sort of bracing myself for him to be there. Whereas I sort of convinced myself that there was no, that, you know, he wasn't really there, and it was just all going to be in her head. And then he was there, and that's what really made me frightened the most. But once it became like a sort of more of a slashery sort of thing, I was able to get through it all right.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like once they do that initial scare, which I think is the moment where she's in bed with Aldous Hodges' daughter, and the sheet is pulled off of them, and then there's like a bunch of fake outs in that scene where she like is looking at a chair, and there's a mannequin, and then she's looking at the chair, and it's like a front on shot of this empty chair, and then she throws the sheet over it, and you're expecting it to, you know, land on him, and it doesn't.
Stepping on the sheet,
and then he steps on the sheet, and it's like, oh fuck, it's
well,
that
actually,
scene is
when he
very
started
creepy.
stepping on that sheet, I remember I turned to Ema and I went, F this movie.
Yeah, that scene is very creepy. And I think this is. I don't want to talk smack about the original adaptation.
Talk smack, Konrad. Talk smack. I'll listen.
The 30. Well, I've not seen it in a long time. Like I think the one that it's 1933, the original one. I've not seen it in a long enough time that I can't really remember anything about it. But I think this is more of a true horror movie than any of the adaptations I've heard about, because it's really singular in its vision and its focus on this one character, which I really enjoyed. The one thing I wanted to also discuss with you, though, is that after the sequence where Cecilia Cass has essentially been abandoned by all her friends and family, some of them are dead, some of them just don't like her anymore, and she's been institutionalized, essentially. And when she breaks out of the mental facility, there is essentially like an action sequence. Like it sort of stops being a horror movie for a little bit as the Invisible Man just like wades through a bunch of security guards and kills them all. And like, did that like tonal shift work for you? Because I know some people who've seen this who are a bit like, that kind of diffused any tension, and the movie didn't really regain it after it.
But that's by that point the ball's rolling. You know what I mean? Like,
that was my argument. Is that I think at that point, you know, you're in your final girl stage. You know, you're gonna have a big chase sequence. That's what you do in horror movies. But it's I enjoyed it personally. But
I don't see the. Maybe someone could put it across a bit better to me if they really feel that way. But I thought it worked well. I thought it made sense for that part of the movie, especially considering when they did go back to the house. Then by that stage there was no real hiding him. Like his suit was glitching out and stuff. So it really,
that's true.
I don't know. I think it worked personally. I like this film.
Yeah. And then the final question to ask about the movie is did Elizabeth Moss just end up killing an innocent man at the end there? Like it's never. I don't think it's ever quite confirmed.
It's a little bit like in the Inception, the spinning top, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely seems like a piece of shit.
Yeah, we all know the answer. I'm going to say I don't think there's any world in which his brother would have... I can't imagine a world in which they got the photo of him having... died by suicide, supposedly, without him being in on that.
Yeah,
but I don't really see that. But also, like he also whispered to her, like, surprise and stuff. Like there was enough clues there for me to.
Oh yeah, I mean he's it's one of those things that I could see someone making like a YouTube video being like, was he actually the Invisible Man? It's like, yes, he obviously was. He absolutely was.
Well, I think also as well, I didn't go back and rewatch this, but I did read somewhere that I think there is a scene in which the only explanation to what's happening with the Invisible Men is that there are two of them. So I think there was probably two at the same time. I will also say, though, this is called the Invisible Man, but something about that camera suit that they put on really gives them super strength as well.
Yeah, you can't dwell too much on it. You can't dwell too much on it. Because it's like, okay, they're invisible men. Are they also bulletproof in that thing?
Yeah.
Because they seem to be shrugging off an awful lot of damage in those things.
That's from the script when it was meant to be part of the world of the Mummy, and then they rewrote it, but they still kept in that a small woman wearing the suit was able to force a knife into a man's throat. Not sure.
It's a very it's a real kind of like Iron Man War Machine situation in these. Like, you just pop the suit on and suddenly you've got access to all kinds of shit that can, you know, make you super strong, or shoot lasers out of your arms or whatever it is.
Well, we also know from the language of cinema, a domestic abuser is for some reason imbued with the power of Satan. They can lift a woman up by the neck and only the neck. You know, they are that strong. So
as a scene in this where, like, and it's a great scene because of how it basically acts on the tension that's built up before it, but where Elizabeth Moss has been left alone in the home after Aldous Hodge has abandoned her because he thinks that she has hit his daughter. And Elizabeth Moss is essentially like wrestling with the Invisible Man, and some of the stuff he does to her with one hand is outrageous. I was like, I watch wrestling quite a lot, and they couldn't do some of the things that this man is doing.
Yeah, and they're trying to help each other too. Yeah,
it's I think Adrian Griffin was in fact wait, hold on, which one's the super strong? Maybe he's the Wolf Man. Could he have also been was he a werewolf and in the Invisible Man suit at the same time, and that's where he got his super strength from?
It is in the same universe.
We never see him at night out of the suit, I should say. That's an opportunity missed for that dark universe that Universal were trying to come up with. They should have just combined all of their horror stories into one person and cast, I don't know, Mads Mikkelsen as the Wolfman / Frankenstein / Dracula.
Mads Mikkelsen, no. That definitely would be Johnny Depp or something, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, well,
still an adverts on TV.
Yep, we've not. Apparently, he's not cancelled enough yet. We really need to hammer home that he hasn't made a good movie in like 20 years, and probably can be gotten rid of at this point. Right, okay, I think that is, unless you've got anything else you wanted to say on Leigh Whannell's The Invisible Man, I think that is going to do it for us.
Yeah, that's me. That's me on it.
Okay, nice. Well, all right, that's going to lead us very naturally and cozily to answer one question, as we always do on the Best Movie Podcast Ever, and that is, of course, what is your favourite movie this week?
We can also rate the film in a second, but I'll...
Oh, yeah, I keep forgetting to do that.
I'll give you my favourite movie. My favourite movie is Mickey Mouse, The Prince and the Pauper, and the reason for
lovely.
that... The reason for that is whenever you've got half an hour, like, you know, I want, like, my kids really want to watch something, but I kind of want the TV back as soon as possible. And The Prince and the Pauper is only half an hour long, so it did wonders this week for me. Conrad, what about you?
You trick them into thinking they're watching a feature-length movie, because kids don't know. They don't understand the concept of time.
Exactly.
It's like, that was a 3-hour movie, actually, guys. Time for bed.
Well, top quality too. Top quality. Let's be honest. Like, now, what about you?
Okay, I think mine is going to be The Invisible Man. I love this movie, and let's talk ratings then. Let's talk turkey. What if if an invisible gun was placed to your temple? What if a Chekhov's gun was placed to your temple? What would you give this movie?
If it's an invisible Chekhov's gun, how did we see it earlier in the scene? If it's
that's a good point.
Okay, so I did like this movie. I think I'm going to give it a 4.
Okay, very bold. Yeah,
I was about to say 3, but I think I'll give it a 4.
Yeah, I think I went for a 4 as well. It was borderline 5 for me. I really like this movie a lot, and if you haven't seen it yet, I really do recommend that you go and seek it out on Netflix if you have access to UK Netflix, or hopefully it's available in other countries as well. I'm sure it is, because it's a good one.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, well, that is going to do it for us this week on the Best Movie Podcast Ever. Thank you to Nancy Wyatt and Jared Iscariot for the use of our theme song. You can find links to their stuff down in the description below. And thank you to you for joining us. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. We are the Best Movie Podcast Ever on podcasting apps, and we are the Culture Cave on YouTube. Get involved in the comments. Let us know if you've seen this or what you thought of it. Give the show a like, really does help. And we will see you same time, same place next week.
And cut.